Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.
In the iRacing Grand Prix World Tour. And so with just those 3 rounds, a championship hangs on the balance here today. It is a case of simply this. A top 2 must suffice for Jacob Reed, but if it's second, P9 gets the job done for Eduardo Rodis. If it's first, P5 gets the job done for the title. It's a day where 2 will swashbuckle out there on the Algarve and say this is where the championship is going to work for us. Welcome to this coverage here on SimSpeed TV. My name's Jake Sperry. Along with me for the ride today is Taylor Mills with Dan Yeaman in the production chair for today's action. And Taylor, this has been an amazing season, and we've just been gifted the strongest ever strength of field in Grand Prix Tour history.
We certainly have, sat at nearly 6.3k strength of field. 17 of some of the best single-seater racers on iRacing by iRacing will take to the Portimao Algarve International Circuit, nestled deep within the heartlands and vacation valleys of Portugal, as we zoom in and take a look at this wonderful circuit. Of course, host to a couple of Grand Prix between 2020 and 2021, and host of a round of the World Endurance Championship for a couple of years. Today we return with these ground effect downforce monsters as they thread their way between the curbs and to the apex of a very fast and flowing circuit. Not to mention that super long flat out turn 15 that opens up onto the start finish straight, and one of our DRS zones here tonight, of which there are 2. The one down the start finish straight as just mentioned, and then that run down into turn 5. It is overtaking opportunities aplenty, as a circuit like this forces you to open up corner entries. It can open up a bit of a dive down the inside if someone's feeling a bit brave.
Sorry, VIP, turn 5, going to be a great place to see passing happen. And then you've got that wonderful middle sector of the lap, up and down and all around the Portuguese hills as they work. That Primera corner, turn 1, will lead to Lagos at turn 3. But then, of course, Galpi coming out of Sagres corner is going to be very telling for who manages what out there in terms of this race. Let's go talk some championship out there, because as we walked into today, these are the standings in the iRacing Championship, where Eduardo Rodis has it pretty much under lock and key over Jacob Reed, who can pick up some stronger points with a high strength of field like it is today, ahead of Florian Kammerer, Voltalux and James Byrne, with George van Rensburg, Ronaldo Augusto, Paulo Reagan, Alex Hagland and Edward Apari-Arie making up the championship as it stands based on strength of field. But we flip it over to where we have our SimSpeed Championship, and there is the difference, 66 championship points. And Taylor, we said at the top of the show, a P3 is not good enough today for Jacob Reed. He'll be looking to improve a lot more than that, get second or first. He has been in the top 2 for the last 4 rounds of the season.
Yeah, he certainly has. He's had a really good back end of the season, but it was really that first half that let his championship slip even, and left him in a spot to not get that third one in a row. It does look like it's going to go the way of Eduardo Rodis, but at the end of the day, this is iRacing, and anything can happen, and it usually does. A little bit of movement further down the table, though. We see Voltalux jump James Byrne for third place. That battle within 1 point, and should go down to the final race. Alex Hagland, with this late season turn of form, has also managed to get in front of part-timer Emil Bernstorff, who does return to have a crack at it tonight. So we'll see if the ex-Formula 2 racer can jump back in front of the Swede. Further down the order, though, it is pretty much as it's been all season long, but there are still championship positions to play for, and everyone out there on track is going to want to maximize their position.
And just as we do a 66-lap race here today, Eduardo Rodis has invalidated his second lap in qualifying, and he can only stare at what everyone is going to be able to do with their laps. So with 2 tyre compounds that have to be used, they will get DRS, the drag reduction system, at the start of lap 3. We've only run at Portimao once, and the winner last time here just so happens to be the 2-time reigning champion, Jacob Reed, who will be looking to try and hunt for success again. Now, we'll be running here C2, C3, C4, as we always do, so there's going to be a little bit more wear as to what there was in 2021. We're expecting the softs and the mediums to be somewhat in a range of window here today, where it's between a 1 and 2 stop.
Yeah, it's one of those strategies that's certainly been the choice of the field the entire season so far, where a lot of drivers have aired towards that 1 stop, and I think that's what we're going to see a lot of here tonight. That hard tyre, I don't think is going to be much of an option, but more importantly, we are just getting to the end of qualifying here, and Jacob Reed has crossed the line to finish his 2nd lap, and currently sits on a very strong provisional pole position.
Yeah, by 1/10 of a second over the lap record holder, IRL at Alton Park, Joseph Loke, in 2nd. Loke with 1 win to his name at Long Beach, but these lap times are starting to tick themselves down, and with only 18 cars, oh, actually, I'll correct myself here today, only 17 the way it's split. This is the elite of the elite. Loke crossing the line will not improve, but the likes of Emil Bernstorff can't. Leopold Steneros 3rd, James Byrne now P6 with that first attempt of a 1:19.1. Brad Newman, the Aussie, here today looking to try and put a good time down to say, this is what I am capable of doing, but that 2nd lap is not going to be good enough. That one will also have to be abandoned out there, so track limits certainly catching quite a few out, and so we have got this helter-skelter style grid here today. So here's where you get the dichotomy, as Mark van Dalen then has a big lockup up the hill trying to get it into pits. You want a strong field, yes, but you've also got not many drivers here, Taylor, so that will mean that it will not be too many to get in the way of Eduardo Rodis today.
No, it certainly won't be. As it stands, he looks to be starting down in P12. 3 drivers still yet to settle out: Brad Newman, Dennis Branch, and Jeffrey Lawler in the final minute of the session. We'll see if they can get any lap times in. But fortunately for Rodis, there's only going to be, 9? No, not even that. Less than 9 cars between him and championship position. Reed has got some strong competition behind him, especially with Joseph Loke starting alongside. If he wants to keep his championship alive, he's going to have to lead down into turn 1, and Loke is not going to make that easy.
No, Joseph Loke knows that today of all days, he wants to be out there stage hunting, going for a victory. It's his 5th start in the iRacing Grand Prix World Tour, and he will know that he'll be looking for some very nice points and potentially a top 10 in the championship, which is held currently by Mr. Top 10, Paul O'Regan. So that's what he'll be gunning for today, but qualifying has got itself done and dusted. No one else is going to be able to set a time within the 8 minutes available with the 2 laps that they are allowed allotted to set. Your grid then will stack up as we switch on over to 66 laps of racing as follows. Jacob Reed then will have the pole position, the two-time reigning champ on a 118.131. Joseph Loke is alongside him for company as Leopold Steneros, making just his second start this season, will go from third, and Florian Kameyer in fourth. Volta Lux will be in fifth position as the battle for third in the championship heats up. James Byrne will go from sixth, as on row 4 it will be George van Rensburg there in 7th, and Edward Apariari making up the top 8. Mark van Dalen starts 9th, the lowest iRacing in the field at 4,800, with Paul O'Regan rounding out your top 10. Alex Hagland will go from 11th, with Eduardo Radice 12th, looking to get his first title out there today. If not, it may have to go to Mangi Kor. It's then Kent Nielsen, the most experienced driver in the field, 13th, with Emil Bernstorff hunting for his first win in 2.5 years in 14th. The three that didn't set times in qualifying were Dennis Branch in the number 8, Brad Newman in the 10, and Jeffrey Lawler in the number 15 machine. But they do have 2 minutes to get themselves gridded up here at Portimao, and it's a downhill pivot on the braking zone into Primera, turn number 1. It is going to be a frantic start to racing, as it is a medium speed turn to get this race out and underway. Jacob Reed's done everything right here in qualifying, a role reversal of what we saw in the mid part of the season, where it was Eduardo Radice getting the qualifying and Jacob Reed miring himself in the back of the pack. So can Eduardo Radice keep himself out of trouble here today? Medium tyres then selected by practically everyone. We wait for the calls of Mark van Dalen, who goes on to a medium, and Joseph Loke to get gridded up to make sure that we are ready for racing action here today. And so they know, as the clock keeps on ticking, that they do not have much time at all before it is all set and situated. And by the looks of things, Joseph Loke is going to have to start this one from pit lane as we get ourselves ready. Lights on, it's one less for Eduardo Radice. Lights out, one doesn't go off the Spanish Steneros. He bogs down horribly and everybody works their way around. Eduardo Radice there on the right. He's had a fantastic start for things. Jacob Reed unchallenged into turn 1 as he works through, and it's contact with Alex Hagland back there in the middle of the pack, and so they're going to scatter. Dennis Branch, another one who has to go wide, and so that brings all the drama off at the start. But what a key start it was for Eduardo Radice. He's got the clearance he wants, but now big one behind him. There goes Bernstorff off with Leopold Steneros.
Yeah, Leopold Steneros lucky to not get run over off the start there, but Emil Bernstorff getting tangled up with him up in turn 4. That will take both of these cars out of contention for that race win, and that's without even talking about the absolute mess that happened at the back of the field at that first corner. Kent Nielsen just about managed to get through that one as cleanly as he could in that particular situation, but it is a dream, or should have been a dream start for Eduardo Radice, who in fact was up the field. Made up 3 spots off the start there. I thought I saw him up in 4th.
Well, he had a great launch, but couldn't quite get much more than that. So, Reed leads. Florian Kameyer, who was second last year here at Portimao, is second at the moment, with James Byrne third and George van Rensburg then in 4th. They will take the opening lap of this race, and Jacob Reed already 1 second clear at the front. Watch out back there for 5th, because Volta Lux trying to eye up a pass with no DRS against Edward Apariari. Down into Primera corner, in comes Paul O'Regan for an early stop. That will be for a front wing, and Jeffrey Lawler from the back, 17th to now 6th in a lap and 3 quarters.
Yeah, you beat me to that one, Sperry. Lawler with a heck of a start as that Volta Lux getting it all sorts of out of shape over the crest at turn 4. Manages to hang on to it, but he's going to come under a bit of pressure from Jeffrey Lawler down into 5 as he locks up late in the corner, and that just lets the American tick closer and closer and closer, and he brings a bit of a battle pack up to this fight for P5 as well, as Edward Apariari, Mark van Dalen, and your championship leader Eduardo Radice all in there, as van Dalen nearly up the back end of Apariari. Will he have to go down into turn 11? He peeks to the inside. It'll be side by side with Apariari, who leaves the room, and will let Radice slip by as well.
Yeah, Lawler ran wide, so Van Dalen's going to get another one. Radice to the outside then here through turn 12, and looking over for Sagres corner, which follows up immediately. Radice gets the pass done, and that will move him up another spot. So he'll look at Van Dalen, he'll look at Jeffrey Lawler here, and he will know, will Eduardo Radice, that Voltalux is the target. P5 is what he wants in this race, and P5 will be enough to take the title away today here at the Autodromo Internacional de Algarve. Jacob Reed with the fastest lap of the race. Defensive line's taken in front. Wide goes Mark Van Dalen. Thank you, says one Mr. Eduardo Radice. He gets it. Look at the send back. No respect for the championship leader. Brilliant from Van Dalen.
Yeah, it was a bit opportunistic of Radice to slot it up the inside, keeping it on the track of Van Dalen on the exit of that corner. But for Mark Van Dalen to then come back at him in the way he did, down at turn 3, so brave as they made contact on the exit of turn 5. That could have been an absolute disaster for Eduardo Radice, but Mark Van Dalen not willing to let this one go. Could this one end in tears? We're going to have to find out the hard way.
The fireworks have started on the opening 3 laps of this race here at Portimao. Oh my word, we have been given a treat to start this one off. Joseph Loke, who started this race on soft, having gone to the pits to start this race, now the fastest lap of the race overall. So he'll be looking to burn those tyres up straight away, move on to mediums in the second half of the race and try and find a way for that to manifest at the moment. Let's go to second though, because Florian Kammerer is under pressure, because James Byrne, rookie, let's remember, this season, is going to dive down the inside. He's going to comfortably take away the position, runs a little wide though through Primera turn 1, and he'll hold himself steady. And now it's his job to chase down the Worcesterman Jacob Reed, who leads this field. Kammerer now down to third, and we'll be looking at George van Rensburg, who will realise now that he's got a great chance to start jumping up and gaining even more points in this championship effort to solidify what will be his run out there overall. He knows that he wants to jump by Emil Bernstorff. He's only 10 points away at current. He jumped into 7th place, potentially 6th, with a good enough result today.
17 incident points to play with here in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour, and James Byrne taking one there on the exit of turn 1 with that slightly wide line. But that is one that you will take every day of the week to secure a move down at the first corner, as he's already 7/10 of a second ahead of Florian Kammerer and starting to bring that gap down to Jacob Reed. It's a bit of an indicator as just how good James Byrne has gotten over the course of the season, as in the first half of the championship, you might not necessarily say that Byrne would be fast enough to challenge Jacob Reed for a race win. But we've already seen it once this season in Monza. There is absolutely no reason he can't do that again, as he takes a 1:21.928, about a 10th of a second faster than Jacob Reed, leaves that gap at just under 2 seconds.
Yeah, Edward Apariari through on Mark Van Dalen. That a pass for 8th position out there. So Edward Apariari will jump up and say, this is the level of what I am trying to reach out there. Hold on to your hats. Catch me if you can. Loke, another fastest lap with a 1:21.5. out there overall. And you would have seen as well, Taylor, on the championship standings, that were it to finish like this right now here on lap 5, that the race would go, the championship would go all the way to the Circuit de Nevers Magny-Cours. You can see it on screen. 47 points the gap would be, which would mean Jacob Reed would be in must-win mode over in the middle of France, and Eduardo Radice would know that just 3 championship points would absolutely put any help away from one Mr. Jacob Reed.
And ain't that the beauty of race cars? We're only 5 laps into this race, and the championship currently sits not in favour of Jacob Reed, but he certainly keeps that one alive. Eduardo Radice is still going to get by the likes of Jeffrey Lawler and Voltalux if he wants to put himself, well, if he wants to lock down that championship. And they're going to be 2 tough customers. Lawler, who's going to want to maximise and get one of his best finishes all season long, and Voltalux, who is in a scrap for 3rd in the championship with James Byrne. But for now, we are locked in. We're locked in on that fight for P8, but now we've got Leopold Steneros throughout that incident at the start of the race being hunted down by Joseph Loke coming down into 1.
Well, Joseph Loke's going to be the big threat here as someone who is going to be now trying to run up the order, and I think Eduardo Rodis has got to keep eyes on Joseph Loke today with that alternative strategy in play after starting from the pits, qualifying the car in the front row. Gets a good run against Daneros now, out of 4, down the hill at Torre VIP, the VIP Tower corner. And there's the move done. Nothing Daneros can do about it after his wild and wacky start of not going anywhere off of the grid. Joseph Loke now up to 11th, and he's only got to look just in front of him for 10th. Alex Hagland now behind, sets the fastest lap of the race.
He certainly has. The pace of those soft runners is electric at the moment, but it's something they're going to have to pay for later on in this race when they get onto that slower medium compound tyre that they're going to have to nurse just a little bit more. But coming through that final corner, Jeffrey Lawler only 0.4 of a second ahead of Eduardo Rodis. The American won't have the help of DRS, but Eduardo Rodis will. That rear flap will open and give him a little bit of a speed advantage of that car in front. But as you can see, it's perhaps not as much as you might have expected, as Rodis barely closing in on that run into turn 1. I think in this case, it's going to be setting something up later in the lap, down at 5, but turn 1 not looking like much of an overtaking opportunity tonight.
Well, it was close, but close isn't going to pay the bills here for Eduardo Rodis. He hits the brakes again. Jeffrey Lawler, who has got 5 starts in this he's got a number of starts in this championship. Rookie this year, has got himself his best finishes, 4 9th places and a 7th. So he's looking at this going, well, career best position at the moment. Can I keep back the championship leader for that best position possible? So over the top of the hill, out of Craig Jones, which is named in memorial to the motorcycle rider who lost his life at that corner, and then over Portimao corner itself. They head over in towards turn 12 once again, and Eduardo Rodis getting a bucket of dirty air.
Yeah, that's one of the things about this track that makes it a little bit more difficult for racing in cars like this. As much as a lot of work was done to reduce the dirty air coming off the back of these in 2022, it hasn't eliminated it entirely, and with the amount of long and fast and downforce reliant corners, it can still make it so hard to follow when you're within that 1 second window. But speaking of that 1 second window, Eduardo Rodis is nice and deep in it on Jeffrey Lawler still, as they concertina up, under braking into turn 3 yet again, and it's going to be an exit out of 4 that will try and set the Italian up for a dive into 5. That rear wing is going to open again for both of these drivers this time, as Volta struggling on the previous lap is going to bring Lawler into his DRS and start to form a bit of a DRS train. It's going to make the overtake a little bit more difficult for Eduardo Rodis, and he's going to have to work for this on Lawler, who is actually holding his own right now.
Well, this is the issue right now for Eduardo Rodis. He knows he needs to gain these 2 places. It's great that Volta looks, he's struggling a bit on pace at the moment, but here's the caveat. He's struggling too much at the moment. He'd love him to be an extra second down the road so that he can leapfrog and jump Jeffrey Lawler like it's a game of checkers. Right now he's stuck in a game of chess, and it's a little bit too difficult at the moment. He's trying to look and posture his position. Knight to F4.
Yeah, it looks like Rodis has been searching all over the place for just a little bit of clean air to try and carry a bit more speed through the corners, but onto the start-finish straight they're going to come yet again. Lawler and Rodis going to have the advantage of DRS, and the gaps will close up and close up and close up as Lux really punching a hole in the air for both these cars in front. Of course, with these 2 following so close, it will create a little bit of drag reduction for Volta Lux, but certainly not as much as getting rid of a whole plane of that rear wing. A new fastest lap is set by Joseph Loke, who continues his march up the field. Someone having a bit of an off is going to put gravel on the tyres of the cars in this fight for P5. But for now, Volta Lux is going to hold on as it's a wiggle coming out of 5. But Jeffrey Lawler and Rodis having to back out of it, has a bit of a stunted run back up the hill into Sector 2.
Yeah, now working through Samsung corner here, turn 8, out on track, over the top of the crest and back down it once again. Looks being reeled in by second after second, and also keep an eye on what that's doing for the podium too, because Florian Kamai has got his eyes set behind him at George van Rensburg, who's within 0.4 of a second, another big wiggle there, and you're really sensing here that George senses an opportunity to go back up onto the podium. His last podium at Zandvoort this season, which broke a duck of over 2 years, to go and get that sorted. On the power they go, and here's where the drive is necessary.
And the gap is going to get closer and closer as Florian Kammer derating quite early on that run to turn 1. Both drivers make the apex, and Van Rensburg just doesn't look like he has the confidence through turn 1 as Radi's very wide through that first corner, but it may have almost given him a run to send it up the inside of turn 3, but he chooses not to take it. And I think this is really reminiscent of everything we've seen from Eduardo Radi so far this season, where he hasn't really been a driver to rush any sort of move, any sort of overtake. He's never gone for the ultimate pace straight away and gone full hog straight away. He's always shown that, not hesitation, but measured holding back. He's always waited to find that ultimate pace, waited to make those positions. And I think that's where he's differed from Jacob Reed in so many aspects all year long. For Reed, he's found himself in these spots, whether it's due to poor qualifying or a poor start, where he's had to make his way up the field as quickly as possible to recover those positions. And it's led to mistakes and errors on strategy, and he's burnt too much tyre too early on. Whereas, like I say, Radi's doing exactly the opposite. Brings every set of tyre in gently, waits to turn that wick up and find that ultimate pace, and looks for the best spot to make that move and doesn't try and take it straight away. And that, I think, has been the mark of his championship, and it's more of what we're seeing today, because he could have got past Jeffrey Lawler with a big dive quite a few times as there's a big check up into 3, but he's done exactly that, kept his nose out of trouble, and made sure to keep himself in these races. That is what's given him a 66-point lead in the championship.
That was very nearly all of that hard work for North. Just there at turn 3, that could have been disastrous. I was about to point out that Joseph Loke is up to 8th. He had an amazing double overtake actually into turn 12, but we'll take a look at this first. Look, he's not expecting the brakes early. I think he misses his mark by 5 metres, and then that just sends him sailing on into the corner there. And Jeffrey Lawler's lucky he's got a car, and so too your championship leader.
Yeah, it was a great job from Lux and Lawler to stay predictable there, as it just meant that Radiz knew that he could put his car to the right-hand side of both of them. And if he needed to brake even deeper, he certainly had the space to do it. Right now, Radiz is locked in on the 2 cars directly in front of him, but as you said, only less than 8 seconds behind now is Joseph Loke. He's on a different strategy, but Radiz is going to have to fight him a little bit if he gets there to keep him behind, to make sure that's not work that has to be done later on in this race. DRS is open yet again, and you can see with the way Lawler's pulling away down that start-finish straight, I think Radice is saving a little bit of battery, harvesting a little bit, and saving it for later on in this race. Maybe towards the end of the stint is when we're going to see him use that hybrid energy a little bit more, use that 170 extra brake horsepower for longer, and strike his move. Lawler thinks he has to defend down into 5, and it's going to compromise his run through the corner as it's a lockup from the American as Radice almost into the back of him yet again. Lawler getting a bit itchy in P6.
Yeah, he had to cover off the move, and then because he shuffled off the line, he's now at 9/10 behind Volta Lux. They're good over the hill, though, keeps it to about 3/4 of a second, so it's not day done in terms of that gap opening up. It was very tough in terms of the pass, but Eduardo Radice having to be very Proustian about this right now. Just have to think about this, maybe even looking at where he is and how heavily Jeffrey Lawler's defending at the moment. Might have to go to the pit stop and undercut to go and get the places needed.
It's certainly an option, but we're still about 20 laps or so away from where we're going to see those first rounds of pit stops for the medium runners. But just keep an eye on that rain light of Eduardo Radice so we can get a bit of insight as to what he is doing with that hybrid. Both drivers now harvesting, cutting that ERS deployment early to, again, save it for a later stage of this stint. Credit where it's due, though, Volta Lux, despite the fact he's got 2 cars behind him, harvesting ERS, and with the DRS open, is holding on to that spot. He is extracting some pace out of those mediums that it looks like Lawler and Radish just can't find, probably more due to the difference between clean air and dirty air than anything. But Lux is putting his car in all the right spots to hang on to 5th.
Yeah, that 5th place, I think, is everything that he wants and then some. He knows that James Byrne is lightning fast today, and so he's only trying to mitigate the losses that he has out there in this one. The gap coming down, you can see 1.3 on lap 10, 0.7 on lap 11, 1.4 on lap 12. That's 3.5 seconds that has come out of that gap of 8 seconds over the last 3 laps. Joseph Loke is marauding in some clean air at the moment, and Eduardo Radice is going to look behind soon, and he's going to realise he is going to have a lightning fast driver behind him who has raced in the GB3 Championship in the real world. Here comes Jeffrey Lawler though. He's got to run now to go and get this pass on Volta Lux. Best form of defence is attack. Put a car in between, and Jeffrey Lawler gets the move done.
And here we're going to have to see a bit of adaptability from Volta Lux, who's been in clean air all race long, but he now finds another car chucking a load of turbulent air off the back of it in front of him, and that's going to reduce the amount of downforce that he has to play with. Besides that, he's going to be carrying extra speed into turn 5 and into turn 1, and he's going to have to juggle that with less downforce to make sure he doesn't just steer wide off the circuit or maybe even over slow a corner. So that fight that was Jeffrey Lawler versus Eduardo Radice has now become Volta Lux versus Eduardo Radice. We've seen it before this season, and it's usually Radice that comes out on top.
Well, 0.7 of a second, you're going to need to hold on to the back of Jeffrey Lawler here, Volta, if you want to make sure that this defence can still hold. And working through now to turn 12, knowing that Sagres corner is next. These long corners, back-to-back corners that are absolute torture out there, Taylor, for the left-hand side tyres. You can see it from Volta Lux, having to take a wider line through the corner to carry the same sort of speed. He's really struggling right now with that tyre wear.
Yeah, it's usually bikes that you find racing around this circuit, so you don't really have to worry about asymmetrical wear between the left and the right, but almost straight away, here comes Eduardo Radice down the inside of turn 1 on Volta Lux with that DRS assistance, as he straight away gets to set back off against Jeffrey Lawler. So that move is done, that move is dusted, and Eduardo Radice is 0.8 of a second away from the championship. I'm lying, aren't I? It's P3 that he needs.
Well, at the moment, it's a case of Jacob Reed's first, so P5 is what Eduardo Radice needs to take the title. He is 49 points ahead at the moment. It is 2 points difference. It is 8 points for being in 6th. It is 10 points for being in 5th. The move would be enough, and it is worth noting as well that if Jacob Reed would finish 2nd, and it would be 9th for Eduardo Radice, that Eduardo Radice has the tie break by 10 wins to 6.
Well, when it comes down to a tiebreaker as well. But for now, Eduardo Radice laser focused on getting himself up into P5. But Lawler absolutely taking advantage of having that clean air and setting a personal best last time by. So that is what Eduardo Radice has got to tackle with to get into that spot. Volta Lux enjoyed that clean air for so long in this first stint, but Jeffrey Lawler defending very early on the straight. That gap is still sat at about 0.6 of a second. Radice with that DRS advantage, but Lawler just trying to move the slipstream to another part of the circuit and reduce the effect on that run down into turn 1. It's going to keep Radice at arm's length for now, but he is closing that gap rapidly as it's already under 0.3 of a second. As the DRS is open yet again, he's almost having a half look down into turn 5. But it is a corner where Lawler has had Radice's number all race long so far.
And Jeffrey Lawler knows a top 5. He's never had a top 5 in the iRacing Grand Prix World Tour, and that would be huge for him, having started at the back of the field with no qualifying time to go and make that happen. And lest we forget that Joseph Loke is still a threat out there in this race. So for Eduardo Radice, if he wants to feel truly comfortable out there, he'll be looking around and saying, right, what can we do? We need to make sure we get this one and one more. So he'll have to try and catch George van Rensburg as well in order to make this happen. So this is about as tough can be in a racing scenario that you have around this circuit. Lap 17, no real takers at the moment here strategy-wise, but you can see the one light there on the dash saying it's there. You wait for the zone. It's a little bit late. There you go. 4 lights on the dash and looking for that run. And Jeffrey Lawler, I think, knew he was safe going into Primera, so he doesn't worry about it there. The dirty air takes a couple tenths of a second away. Back into Lagos corner, turn 3, then back up the hill at turn 4. You have to try and run wide, get as square as possible over this hill to catch as much speed as possible before you go over the crest and back down it once again. Again, it's covered off by Jeffrey Lawler by having a lot of speed through that section.
Yeah, he did a great job of maximizing his exit through 4 and carrying the speed all the way down that straight and into that downhill braking zone into turn 5. That's sort of one of the things that can make an overtaking zone a little bit easier, is of course when the car is going downhill, it means more speed is being, well, more momentum even, is being carried in that forward direction. And it just extends the length of those braking zones a little bit more than you might expect. And that's when we can see those dive bombs start to appear. 'Cause once you've got a braking zone that's so long, it's when you can really go for those late braking maneuvers, those deep dives, and try and snatch the apex away from the car in front. It's a little bit more difficult to create those opportunities when you've got enough downforce to, well, have you driving upside down on a tunnel. But we'll see if Eduardo Rodriguez can take advantage of it this time. Rising closes side by side under braking, and Lawler isn't going to fight that one as Eduardo Rodriguez moves up to 5th, and that is significant for his championship.
It is, because it now puts him in the driving seat. The title is decided if it stays like this, but Lawler might have a chance to scrap back here into Torre VIP and is not going to get the run that is necessary. A good 10 laps it took for Eduardo Rodriguez to put that together, but he's got the move, and behind that you've got Joseph Loke, who sits at 1.2 behind Volta Lux at this moment. This is for 7th and 8th, and that gap has been coming down a second a lap out there with each and every attempt that's been going through. And Volta Lux, give him some credit, he's been increasing the pace each lap. 3 tenths he's gained over the last 3 laps, but he's still down a second a lap.
Yeah, I think this just goes to show how much he burnt those tyres trying to stay in front of Rodriguez and Lawler. That car, or those tyres even, just don't quite have the same edge as they did earlier on in this race. Joseph Loke, though, doing an equally good job to keep those soft tyres in such a window where he's got this pace advantage over everyone in front of him. I can see him taking those softs a lot deeper into this race perhaps than we expected, and being very aggressive on when he changes over to those mediums. It'll be a run down into turn 1 yet again, where Lux will hold on to his position and Loke will have to wait for another opportunity. Look how much he closes up under braking.
Well, look at this, because this is medium downforce package. Almost everyone has gone for a medium downforce package, except Joseph Loke, who has gone for a high downforce package as Leopold Steneros goes through on Edward Apari. Oh, look at that! Straight down the inside, blink and you miss it stuff. He came at it from a mile away, and Volta Lux saw the move and immediately lifted out of it, because he's just trying to save the tyre now as much as he possibly can. Joseph Loke is up to 7th, and Jeffrey Lawler will be next for him.
Well, I said it was difficult to make moves like that work, but Joseph Loke, with what seems to be the tyre advantage at this stage of the race, does make it happen. A late braking maneuver snatches the apex away from Volta Lux. There is a lockup in there, and he did send a little thanks to Volta Lux for not just turning in on him there, because that was a very late move. But for Loke, that's going to put him into P7 from a pit lane start, as he is still fighting to get those positions back, and what a job he is doing of it so far.
He's doing a great job. We've got battles going all through this field, down for 12th and 13th at the moment. There is Ken Nielsen, and fan favourite here today, here on SimSpeed TV, Brad Newman, trying to work out whether he can find a way by the most experienced driver on the grid in Kent Nielsen. Nielsen, in terms of racing starts out there, in terms of his whole championship career, this is start number 79.
Yeah, that's certainly not bad, is it? But he's coming under all sorts of pressure from Newman down that start-finish straight. And he's one of the most staunch defenders in the series. It is going to be a really tricky job for Newman to get by for that P12. As comparing lap time to lap time last time by, the advantage is squarely in Nielsen's court. A good 0.3 of a second faster on the previous lap. Newman just struggling a little bit in that dirty air now, as Nielsen just trying to close that gap on Mark Van Dalen. He's got some work to do if he wants to get there, as it's a 14-second gap, but will be chipping away at it and trying to get it closed and trying to snatch a SimSpeed Championship point out of this.
Yeah, so a little lock-up not going to help. And remember, Paul O'Regan, Dennis Branch and Alex Hagland all had to pit on the opening lap of the race, as it is Dennis Branch trying to get back at Paul O'Regan for position. Number 8 on the car for Dennis Branch. Here is a driver that traditionally is a very good qualifier and struggles a bit for race pace, and he runs a little wide there going through Samsung corner, so won't get the chance here, I think, for the second half of this lap. But for Dennis Branch, couldn't get a qualifying time in today, so he already got himself put on the back foot. When your strength doesn't go the way you want it to, you really are having to scrap and claw for anything you can get your hands on.
Yeah, and it certainly doesn't help that both of these cars involved in early race incidents. Paul O'Regan having to come down for a new wing on lap 1, and the same situation for Dennis Branch only a lap later. Both of them switching onto that soft compound tyre to try and go aggressive in the early phases of the race before switching onto a set of mediums, and now finding themselves scrapping over 14th place. It's going to be Branch with DRS on the run down into turn 1, but saving that battery yet again. He won't close up on Paul O'Regan, who is fighting to hold on to that spot.
Through Lagos corner, which is turn 3, on track and back up the hill again. Here at turn number 4, a third of the race then. Score, or it will be score complete at the end of this lap, but here comes the move. Branch to the inside. Oh, cheeky from Paul O'Regan. Covered it off middle of the road, taking the corner. Very tough to get by, because it means you have to use the extremes of the circuit. You either go to the extreme inside, or you got to go the long way around, the high road.
Yeah, tricky to fight that one as well. And I think it was a bit of a late defense from Paul O'Regan as well, moving in that braking zone, which is a big no-no, especially in cars like this where you have to commit to moves early. There isn't going to be much you can do when the car in front of you suddenly changes line into a gap that was there that you were going for. We've seen it at Baku between Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen, well, I say only 7 whole years ago at this point. Goodness gracious me, it seems like that one was yesterday. But it's a mistake for Paul O'Regan in that middle sector that has let Dennis Branch close all the way up into turn 15. He'll have that DRS again. This might be the time that he chooses to make that move stick into turn 1, but he's going to lose a few car lengths on that run down the start-finish straight, and that move won't present itself this time by. It's a great bit of driving for Paul O'Regan in that final sector to bring that gap back out.
Alex Hagland then dives into the pits. He's had enough of that soft tyre, and I want to talk medium tyres now, because James Byrne is really struggling now. He's 7 seconds off of your race leader, Jacob Reed, the 2-time champ, and knows that Florian Kammeyer has been driving this one absolutely stellarly. In his last 3 races, Florian Kammeyer has had a 7th, and a 9th. We can say it's been a horrible run of form recently for Florian Kammeyer. It's one where he looked like he was nailed on dead certain earlier on in the season to be a challenger. And let's put Fuji into perspective as well. 12th place there. So this is must score points now for Florian Kammeyer if he wants that 3rd place in the championship.
Yeah, him and Voltalux being nailed together all season long and fighting over the same championship spot has been one of the more exciting battles for the last 21 races, and it's going to come a little bit down to the wire, depending on how the scores line up today, especially with Voltalux being all the way down in P8. But as you said, Sperry, in this later phase of the stint, James Byrne's pace has just started to drop off a little bit, as he hasn't quite been able to hold on to those medium compound tyres in the same way as Jacob Reed and Florian Kammeyer. Kammeyer, who now sits only 0.6 of a second off his rear wing. He might be thinking now could be the time to come down pit lane and bolt on a fresh set of tyres, but it's going to leave him a little bit out of position, especially in the end phase of the race, as those softs will be even more dead than those mediums are now.
Loke looking to pit then behind Jeffrey Lawler. So he will go through, and I think he may. Oh, he sped into the lane. So he's going to get absolutely nailed on with a penalty now as he sits down. Oh, that's going to really hurt. And speaking of hurt, George van Rensburg now sees Eduardo Radice, who's the fastest driver on track, diving to the inside and make that P4 now for the Italian.
Yeah, another great move down into turn 5, taking advantage of that DRS and throwing it up the inside to take the apex before the driver in front can turn in. This is George van Rensburg, though, who was scrapping over P3 only 10 laps or so ago. Another driver that seems to have just suffered from a lack of pace in the late phase of a medium tyre run, and it's what's allowed Eduardo Radice a relatively easy move to take that P4. And I think Sperry Radice still finds himself in the hunt for a race win here today.
I think he does. Track temperature here, it's worth talking about. It's only 29 degrees, so it's what we call for an October 31st out there, which is the race date that we're using here. We'd say that it's ideal in these autumn to, or late autumn conditions, early winter. So this is probably about as nice as you could have for the middle of the day. But Joseph Loke will know that his day is run. Eduardo Radice will know that he has had an absolutely wonderful start to this race, picking himself through one car at a time. And he will know that the car in front of him is the lap down Joseph Loke right now, who's moved to a medium set with Kammeyer and James Byrne next up on the list. There is Joseph Loke in P15. All of it to do to even salvage points.
Yeah, lock up into 5 on those cold, medium compound tyres as well, and fighting with the dirty air coming off the back of Dennis Branch and Paul O'Regan, a position that has since switched, with O'Regan finding himself in front and fighting Dennis Branch off behind. It should be relatively easy pickings for Joseph Loke when he does make it to the back of those cars, as here comes the replay of Loke getting that speeding penalty, as it's a 60km/h pit lane speed limit, and he blew it by nearly a full 20km/h.
Yeah, he missed it by a mile. He said, swear I can't stop getting 40-second holds for speeding. Well, I'll turn around, Taylor, and say, practice your pit entry.
Oh, it's certainly something that you need to do, and I'm sure Joseph Loke will have put up time and effort into getting that pit lane entry right.
This was his double pass.
But, yeah, we'll see the double pass again as we talk about that. But once you get into the heat of the fight and the heat of the race, you can just lose track of these tiny little things that can become pretty huge errors in the grand scheme of things. And that's just the sort of thing that's bit Joseph Loke out there today, expending so much mental effort to get all of those positions, doing the likes of those double overtakes for a whole third of a race, and then just, again, losing that concentration at a key phase and finding himself now stuck behind Dennis Branch, but not for long.
That's Florian Kammeyer, so he's got every right to lap himself as a driver, and Florian will not be best pleased because he got really wiggly there through Torre VIP, and so as he was going through that section, he'd look at Joseph Loke and say, what are you doing? You are forcing me off my line when I'm trying to go out there and battle James Byrne. And James is now going to have exactly the same problem. Joseph Loke's going to want to make a way through. He gets close to the rear of the American. He's not going to go and get that pass done, but this is the awkward phase of the race. If cars are quicker, you go for it, and now he just has so much more grip on the inside, old medium versus new medium, and he goes and gets that move. Brilliantly done, and even worse, James Byrne's going to have the straight line speed off of the exit, and he's going to soar straight back by him.
Yeah, of course, with the DRS and with the fact that he's running a lower downforce aero package, Joseph Loke being the only car in the field, we think, on that high downforce, it's what's just given given Byrne that extra little bit of speed to get back in front. We'll see how it holds up for him through turn 4 as they're going to go side by side down into turn 5. DRS flap is going to open for Loke as he'll send it up the inside yet again, but it's a lock up that it's going to delay Byrne on the exit of the corner. And I'll tell you what, someone that isn't complaining about any of this is Eduardo Radice, only 2 cars behind. And as the proverbial cat of Joseph Loke has been thrown amongst the pigeons of Byrne and Kammeyer, it has allowed Eduardo Radice to get within a second and a half of second place.
He will know know how critical this is with everybody now starting to form up with Eduardo Radice there. He'll know he'll have to get by Florian Kammer. He'll have Christoph Klinkmann in his ears, giving him as much help as possible. Wide, though, goes Kammer, struggling for any sort of traction there through turn 12. Now over through Sagres corner, and you'll look at Galpi and say, where is the move going to happen? Where am I going to be safe and okay? And will I have to start thinking about the pits? Look at the drive now by Eduardo Radice. There's no DRS open there for Florian Kammer. It's come too late on the straight, and Eduardo Radice scything his way up to third, and now he'll have James Byrne in mind here for second.
Yeah, Radice has done a great job in maintaining these medium compound tyres, and it's what's given him this pace advantage in the late phase of the first stint. Let's just talk about that for a quick second, because the reason that these drivers are staying out so long on sets of tyres that are clearly so far past their pros is the spin for James Byrne as he nearly collects Eduardo Radice, who is nearly collected by Florian Kammer as well, who will make his way up into second. But all these tyres being in such a state with these old mediums, it's all because of that 60km/h pit lane. It is so slow to trundle through there that it is faster to stay out on track on dead tyres than it is to take a second stop. But even then, look how much Joseph Loke has flown away from this fight for seconds.
James Byrne, that spin, all because he grabbed the anti-cut curve on the inside of Torre VIP. It's there for a reason, and that reason is don't go near it, and so that's where the trouble lies. Now, will it be for the second time in 2 laps? Eduardo Radice finding a way by Florian Kammer. Up the hill they go, and here comes the drive. Right-hand side it will be. Easy, says Eduardo. P2, and now 12.7 seconds to hunt down the 2-time reigning champion, Jacob Reed, who leads this field, and we've seen none of him here today because he's just waltzed away from everyone.
Yeah, Reed doing everything he can to try and keep his championship well and truly alive. But Eduardo Radice just sat here going, you could start me anywhere in this field, I'll just make up the spots to get myself back in championship position. And that is exactly what he's done, and then some, as Brad Newman trying to find his way down the inside of Kent Nielsen, who defends it very firmly as he goes again down into the second to last corner, as Nielsen almost has to avoid on that run through to turn 15. And it's going to break them apart from nose to tail as they get to that DRS zone. Brad Newman will have it available, but Nielsen defending to the middle of the road, and Newman won't have a chance down into turn 1. But that one almost ended in disaster.
Well, this is what happens when 2 very hard-nosed sim racers decide they want to start battling it out. And again, a look to the inside. Brad Newman is just chucking it in the mirrors at every single corner, going, well, one of them's got to stick, and it might be now, because he'll get a great run here up turn 4. Here's the defence then by Ken Nielsen. Newman to the outside, looking for the pass, but again, he's too late on the brakes. He's now looking for drive off the exit. Look at the lot going through. Radice with the fastest lap check mark that goes through, and he's searching around now up to turn 7 and 8. Trying to find this move over towards Samsung, still not going to get it. Brad has a big wiggle on the exit.
These two really pushing each other for P11 as it stands. Both drivers yet to make a pit stop in this race, and those mediums, as we've said, by this phase of the race, at least for everyone who isn't called Eduardo Radice, are well past their best as Newman goes again down into turn 13, and this time he's going to get it done as Kent Nielsen will have to cede the spot and look for a chance with DRS down into 1. But it's a great late move from Newman, almost indefensible from Kent Nielsen.
But Kent's got medium downforce, Brad's got a high downforce package, so look out. There goes Kent, rocket missile, 314, plays 288 on the straight.
And then it's advantage Nielsen all over again, but with that extra corner speed that Newman can carry, especially in that middle sector, is what's keeping him so close in this fight for P11. He'll get another chance down into turn 5 this time by, but it's whether or not Nielsen feels the need to decide. That DRS flap is going to open yet again, and Newman will look to the outside, all in the marbles through turn 5. He's going to lose a bit of grip and won't be able to fight as hard mid-corner, but Nielsen is doing exactly the same thing. Both cars locking up, I think, into 5 that time by, but look at the speed advantage that Newman has through here.
Well, look behind as well, because they've now brought Dennis Branch within a second now as they crest the rise down into Craig Jones' corner, which has got that negative G as you go through there, and then back up the rise again to the double rights of Portimao. 10 and 11 we'll call them here, as iRacing calls this a 15-turn circuit. Here's turn 13 of those 15, trying to set it up right now, and Brad Newman knows that the straights are going to be tough, and again he goes to the inside, and it's a little chop over the nose by Ken Nielsen. If he does that too often, he's going to get turned around. He's a driver who is no stranger to finding a non-finish in this championship. He's done it 16 times. Brad knows that he's stuck behind, and so he's going to go and hit his marks. He was very slow to the line. He needs now a good few laps on a set of softs.
Yeah, it feels a little bit early for the first stop for the medium runners. Is Newman going to trundle down that 60km/h pit lane and bolt on a fresh set of soft compound tyres? Whereas out there on circuit, he's leaving Dennis Branch to scrap with Kent Nielsen, as they're going to be side by side on the run down to turn 5, and it's going to be Branch with the advantage on the inside with the higher downforce package, and he's going to grab that spot away from Kent Nielsen. And now, being the higher downforce car through this middle sector, his challenge is to pull out a second and hope it doesn't give the car behind that DRS advantage on the start-finish straight.
Well, here's the key. You've got soft tyres versus mediums, and he is absolutely romping away up over the top of the crest. Takes a big wide line to carve through Portimao corner and down the hill, then through 12 over to 13 here at this next left-hander. These very parabolic style corners they go through, almost reminiscent to another Iberian style circuit, Taylor, of course, of the circuit of Barcelona Catalunya. And there, just behind, that's your race leader, Jacob Reed, who has jumped up on the scene at just the right time.
He certainly has, but they've got to give Algarve some credit where it's due. I do love the way that this track just goes up and down all the undulation in the area, because you'd expect, if you're building a multi-million euro racing facility, God, can you imagine if it was just like 200 euros to build this track? A multi-100 million euro racing facility, that you'd want to flatten out that bump on the start-finish straight. But they went, you know what? No, let's keep it. It's going to be part of the character of the circuit as it twists and turns and always roller coasters its way through the Algarve hillside. And honestly, I think it makes the track all that much better.
The cars in the pits, Eduardo Radice, Volta Lux, Paul O'Regan and Kent Nielsen's just left. So that now signals that the pit window is open, and for Jacob Reed, he will feel like he might need to come in this lap to cover off this run. He has got himself the pole position, he has got himself the race lead, he's led every lap. All he needs now is the fastest lap of the race, Taylor, and this could be a Grand Slam. Very much the case, so unless Florian Kamai decides he's going to lead a lap. So this is where you're going to start looking around and saying, how faultless do you need to be? Jacob Reed's pivoting right, though, but he'll stay out for another one.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth there, Sperry. Whether or not he gets the Grand Slam all depends on whether Kamai, Byrne or Van Rensburg stay out when he pits. Reed's big focus right now is going to be making sure he gets clean air when he comes out of pit lane after his what should be one and only pit stop. It's something that Eduardo Radice has been gifted with a little bit right now, as he finds himself 3 seconds behind Paul O'Regan, as both of them pitting on roughly the same lap or on tyres that are getting into their window. But this thing that Radice is always able to do is get those tyres right in their performance window exactly when he needs them to be. He's been one of those drivers, even this race, that can hold onto a set of tyres for a very long time as he goes purple in that final sector, and the charge is on for that race win.
So in the pits, Jeffrey Lawler, George Van Rensburg and James Byrne. Leopold Steneros then, the Swede, is also down in the pit. So Steneros has work to do. Mark van Dalen is going to be under pressure now on circuit as we focus on your leader here, because here comes Volta Lux. This is old tyres versus new, and the Dutchman's going to lose out because thank you very much. There goes Volta Lux, who will jump straight on through. And Jeffrey Lawler's just spun in front and spun again on cold tyres. Now he's going to need to do a doughy to go and get himself back in a straight line and gets himself back up to speed again, but he would have torched the rears.
Yeah, that was on his outlap as well, and on this slightly older time model that these cars are running on, any sort of sliding is going to overheat your tires and make it all that much more difficult to get any sort of power down or any sort of turning done. And Lawler leaving himself on the back foot for a good lap or so here as those surface temps crawl their way back down to normal. And it's going to mean he's going to struggle to get the core temperature up. We're going to see a replay here of Jeffrey Lawler coming out of pit lane, and you'll be able to see that spin he had down at turn 3.
Yeah, through turn 1, all right. Through turn 2, okay. What happens when you take all of the aerodynamics off of it? And there, just as he was trying to light up for the power, it goes around, and then he thinks he's got it corrected, but then the car snaps back, and they say that this is a car that not everybody can drive, and you just see it there in proof, the W13, how tough it is with Lawler. Edward Apari-Ari now in the pits as Eduardo Radice sets the fastest lap of the race.
And that is a statement from Radice, who is showing just how fast he can go in this phase of the race and trying to almost shake Jacob Reed a little bit. A man who is already doing everything he can to hold on to his championship. And Radice almost on a bit of a victory lap at this point, as there is absolutely nothing more he needs to do than bring this car home absolutely mistake-free. Even if the race win goes to Jacob Reed today, it will be Radice that walks home with that championship, as you say, Sperry, Jacob Reed making his way down pit lane for the first and what should be only time.
So it will be no Grand Chelem out there because Florian Kammeyer will lead a lap of this race. So Jacob Reed gets on his set of soft tyres. He's hit his strategy number and he'll be out and away. He'll have himself about half a straight's worth of advantage as Jacob Reed is now clear of Eduardo Radice. But it's Radice's time to try and work back that gap. And with a bit of help of DRS from Paul O'Regan, a 1:20.3 that lap from Eduardo Radice. He is motoring.
He certainly is. And that undercut for Radice has taken 5 seconds out of Jacob Reed's lead, and it's pretty much going to stay round about, if assuming they match pace, it'll stay round about that close all the way to the end of this stint, as it'll be Radice's tyres that go off that little bit earlier as he's completed his 3rd lap on that set of softs. But Reed now in 2nd place, waiting for Kammeyer to stop to retake the race lead. Just has to bring those softs in so much more gently than he has done all season long so far, especially if he wants to hold on for that win. We'll see how this unfolds over the next 30 or so laps, as there is still a very long way to go here.
Florian Kammeyer stays out then for another lap, 37 on his stint as he looks to try and make something of this race. We look back to EOA, Edward Apari-Ari versus Dennis Branch. This for a point. Or 2.
Let's see if Apari-Ari can hold on to it. Dennis Branch all over the back of him as they come into that middle sector. That clean air that Apari-Ari has right now is going to give him a bit of an advantage in terms of getting his car through these really fast sweeping corners. But with, well, it's very different tyre ages on both of these cars. With Dennis Branch on 33 lap old softs, I think I'm reading there. And that actually is something I wanted to touch on earlier when he was driving past old medium runners like they were stood still. Dennis Branch has done something with the setup on that car and is driving it in such a way that it is keeping a set of softs alive and fast 33 laps into their stint at a track where they should really be dying after about 15.
I heard he's got Alex Albon's number, and that's why he's able to do so well with it at this point in time. But for the moment, Dennis Branch staying with Edward Apariari, but it is EOA that is starting to stretch the legs a little bit here. You can see the wider lines being taken by Dennis Branch. Even if you're a tyre whisperer, you know that you are going to struggle in the dirty air of the car in front. So at some point he'll go. Now comes your race leader into pits, Florian Kammeier, which should give now Jacob Reed the race lead.
Apariari and Dennis Branch both locking up down into turn 5, but Florian Kammeier will, well, I say will come out in P3. Up on the jacks he goes. James Byrne only 3 or so seconds behind, as the undercut proving to be very powerful today, as Kammeier will lose that spot, might even lose out to George van Rensburg as well. Stays clear of Volta Lux, and just like that, for what feels like the first time in a long time, Kammeier and Lux are only a position separated out there on track. It's a big wiggle coming out of turn 3 for Kammeier, though, as he makes his way up and over the hill. He's not going to have the DRS advantage on George van Rensburg, but the German is struggling to get those softs up to temperature.
He is, and so when he's struggling to get those tyres up, Volta Lux now is going to need this stint to be absolutely lightning fast, and so he'll know that every second he can jump on is going to be key. But if Florian does get those tyres in the window and starts using them, he should be the best in this final stint. So George van Rensburg will be the one who'll have to watch out, who's trying to hunt James Byrne, who was half a second quicker on that last revolution of the circuit around. So it is not as simple as this race is done and dusted. The gap starting to form at this point of the race. And let's not forget that Joseph Loke has a shot of a point here, even after that speeding penalty on the mediums.
2.1, just over 2 seconds off the back of Dennis Branch, as that gap just continues to close and close and close. Both of these cars on the same aero package, so it is going to come down to who is the faster out of these two drivers. I think, just checking again, yeah, Branch still yet to pit, has to get onto those medium tyres, so Joseph Loke will inherit that 10th place and that 1 SimSpeed Championship point once Branch comes down for his second stop of the race. And then it's going to be Branch who has all the work to do on a fresh set of mediums to make his way back up through the field. But we know the immense pace of Joseph Loke, so I don't think 10th place is going to be where he stops today.
I think it will be 9th place where he stops today, because it's 14 seconds to Leopold Steneros out there, who's doing 1:20.8 compared to the 21.3 that Loke just did on that last lap. So I think if he's got any hope of getting any higher than P9, this is going to be as tough can be as far as it goes. So, you know, you're looking at this race, it's of his own fault out there, but a couple of points is certainly going to pay some dividends, as there goes the fastest lap from Jacob Reed. He puts a 19.9 down on the board and says, try and match that.
Well, Eduardo Rodis certainly wasn't able to on that previous lap, as he was only good enough for a 1:20.396, which is still immensely quick around the Algarve circuit, but not enough to close that gap on Jacob Reed. He's got Alex Hagland a few seconds in front of him now. So that blue flag traffic going to cause a couple of issues as Newman throws it at the inside of Kent Nielsen, yet again taking advantage of a slightly higher downforce package, as the Canadian will have the advantage of the inside line through turn 7 and 8 and will stay in front for 14th yet again. Newman really wants to get clear of that car in front of him and try and run away, but Nielsen is not giving him the chance to at all, as it's down the inside of Portimao, snatching that apex, and now he's only got 3 or 4 corners to extend that gap over a second.
Oh my word, Brad Newman, what a move to get that done over Portimao corner there. He just rampaged his way through there, and Ken Nielsen let him bolt through the gate and run off. But now's going to be the issue, because it's not just Ken Nielsen that's trying to get through. You've got Paul O'Regan, who is on a 4-race drought now of getting a top 10, and it's going to be 5 at this rate, but Ken Nielsen easily gets his move back, and Paul O'Regan from a mile back sends it down the inside and gets it.
Wow, that speed advantage from Paul O'Regan thanks to that medium downforce package, meaning he was able to take, sorry, not just take advantage, but snatch that apex away from Newman through turn 1. And it's a move that almost came out of absolutely nowhere, but shows just how important it is to keep that momentum up, as it's going to be another position on the road lost to James Byrne as he cuts his way through this traffic.
There's your leader, and there is third place, James Byrne, who's now having to try and navigate through this. He's got 4 seconds to play with here to George van Rensburg, the South African, in at that 4th place, who at current will be jumping up in the championship ahead of Emil Bernstorff, who is your only retiree from this race, which happened on the opening lap, where he found himself the beneficiary of Leopold Steneros, so the Dane and the Swede deciding that Scandinavian relations not quite what they used to be out there overall in this, as James Byrne working through, waiting for DRS, the drag reduction system. It'll give you an extra 80 brake horsepower in a straight line, and enough to say, I can sidle my way by Paul O'Regan at the most risk-averse place on circuit.
Paul O'Regan making his way over to the side of the circuit to let James Byrne slide through on the preferred racing line into turn 1. And in that little bit of scrapping with traffic and sending one up the inside of Brad Newman, it's left Kent Nielsen in a position to just start to run away a little bit. He's given himself a bit of breathing room to O'Regan and Newman, who were causing him so many issues early on in this race as he has to lock up down into turn 5. Just means that fight for the just outside the point spots goes to between him and Dennis Branch. Remember, Branch pitting slightly later in this race onto a fresh set of softs as he started on the medium, so he doesn't need to go back onto those. Could be a straight fight between who is fastest. We've got some more scrapping for position between Edwin Apariari and Joseph Loke as they almost touch on the exit of turn 1.
Joseph Loke was so switched on to what Edward Apariari was going to do. That racer's instinct kicked in. He was immediately back on the attack when he knew that he had the advantage through turn 2 to Lagos at turn 3, and Lagos was the corner that got it done. Apariari now knows he'll lose the middle sector in this battle, and Joseph Loke up to 9th place. And it shows you that even though that this race has gone wrong, not taking the grid from qualifying the car on the front row, not having the opportunity to say this is what I'm capable of, then with the drive-through, with the speeding penalty, down on the lane, he's now 9th, and he looks at Edward Apariari and he says, see you bye.
Personal best in Sector 2 for Joseph Loke, as well as he is waltzing away from 10th place Edward Apariari. It means that the Brit won't have the slipstream, won't have the advantage of DRS or the slipstream on the start-finish straight. We'll see how much that medium downforce package can close him up on the run down to turn 1. But Joseph Loke, with the slight advantage right now, should be able to stay out of trouble from Edward Apariari.
Yeah, managing it very wonderfully now, running through turns 1, 2 and 3. Primera, you can call it Secondo if you want, and then Lagos, turn 3. Able to build that margin, 9/10, 1.1 over the top of the crest, and so safe again. A change of position then as Brad Newman gets through on Paul O'Regan, just in front of George van Rensburg, out there on track, and that's a big slide off of the exit, and look at the wheelwork that was needed there to keep that pointed straight there off the exit. O'Regan now will get the run, and so too George van Rensburg, but here comes the pass. Watch out then, Brad. Here comes Paul, who moves on and flies away to get it done, and for Brad Newman, through also goes George van Rensburg. What a great season he's having.
Yeah, absolutely the right thing to do for Brad Newman to let both of those cars go, as that fight was already over with Paul O'Regan the second that DRS flap opened, and there was no point even for Newman to fight a black up car of George van Rensburg, who was trying to set off after James Byrne. That gap in that fight for third currently sat at 4.5 seconds, but even through that traffic being relatively kind to Paul O'Regan, he's lost a second or so to Florian Kamai, who's now just about 3 seconds behind him, and hoping for the same sort of courtesy from these two fighting for position.
Well, you'd hope that the courtesy's there, and we've seen it over the course of this race with just the one retirement Florian Kammeyer wants to hunt. You can see the differences. James Byrne would move back into third in the championship by 6, and 26 points back would be Florian Kammeyer as it currently stands. You then start looking at Emil Bernstorff. He'll drop to 8th out there, and Joseph Loke, by the credit of his 9th place, will move above Ken Nielsen to 12th, but this could have been a day where Joseph Loke could have moved himself into that top 10 ahead of Paul O'Regan.
Yeah, which is even more impressive as a part-time driver as well, as Loke hasn't been here for every single round this championship. He's just sort of picked and chosen the races he wants to do, which of course he's absolutely entitled to do. But just goes to show how competitive he's been every single time he's turned up, that he is able to be challenging the fringes of the top 10 against a driver who has been here for most of, I think only missing 1 or 2 races, but most of the races so far this iRacing Grand Prix Tour season. But back at the front of the field, 43 laps ticked off so far, like 44 laps even. Jacob Reed still leads the way, only by 8 seconds from Eduardo Radice, but the gap stays stable. Reed has taken advantage of those soft tyres and getting a good gap between him and Radice before those soft tyres inevitably start to fall off.
7.5 almost it was over the line. In fact, it was marked on the finish line as 7.5 seconds, the margin. So Jacob Reed now, as he ticks over the hour point in this race, is now really trying to extend his margin. He knows he's done everything he can possibly do out there today. He's got the pole position, he's got the fastest lap, he has led all bar a handful of laps which Florian Kammeyer has had by a different strategy. It has been faultless there for Jacob Reed, but here lies the problem. It's all right being faultless at the end of the season, but you've got to give yourself a platform where you need to be faultless out there, and that's what he's failed to do. You've got to look back through the results of this season here, Taylor, to say, where has it gone wrong? 12th at the Nürburgring, a non-finish at Barcelona on the opening lap, couldn't start the race at Aragon due to illness, so was already going to be 1 down, and then that 9th place at Long Beach. Those are big stings in a championship where Eduardo Radice 16 times this season has seen the podium. Sorry, I'll correct myself, 17 times this season.
I think there's a silver lining to every cloud, and as much as this cloud is this season has been a bit of a dark cloud for Jacob Reed, it's at least very easy for him to take a step back and point out everywhere that this season has gone wrong for him. He's had the raw pace to take on Eduardo Radice at every single turn, but his execution has been good most of the time, but it's when it's slipped a little bit that's really cost him that championship. All of those non-scores, non-starts, non-finishes, where Radice has done the exact opposite and kept himself in the fight race after race after race. Reed's got a lot of data points to look back on, and I think the biggest takeaway that he'll have from this 2025 iRacing Grand Prix Tour season is to just be a little bit more patient. Like, bring the tyres in a little bit more gently when we get to Phillip Island. Don't go for those moves as soon as the opportunity opens up for you. Just take your time, breathe a little bit more, and take advantage of the pace that you have, because that's what Eduardo Radice has done, and that's why he's about to wrap the championship up 2 rounds early.
So we look over to Paul O'Regan and Brad Newman. This is the closest battle out there on track. It is also getting close, by the way, between Volta Lux, Jeffrey Lawler and Leopold Steneros for 6th, 7th and 8th places. So we'll keep an eye on that as it develops. But O'Regan here, every time he looks like he's got the chance to break away, another car laps him, and suddenly Brad Newman's back again.
Yeah, such is life with the blue flags and the lap traffic at a track that is as short as this one. It's one of the shortest laps on the calendar. The lap time itself helps out a little bit by the fact that the average speed is a little bit low, but Steneros is going to have the advantage of DRS as they make their way down the start-finish straight. It's quite the fight we're looking at right now, as it's going to be Paul O'Regan who is just trying to hunt down Brad Newman, as there's Lawler in there and Leopold Steneros. It will be the DRS that drags Steneros up to the back of Lawler, as the American just fighting with a little bit of dirty air off Volta Lux in front, who once again finds himself in a position where he's got no one in front of him for 8.5 seconds, and he can just drive into the most gentle, clean air that you ever did see.
Ninth start in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour for Leopold Staneros. He had 7 last year. This just his second, as he has been a little bit MIA over the course of this. But Leopold, a driver whose best result actually came at Manicourt 1 year ago. He got a 2nd place there. He's had 2 podiums to his name and currently top 40 in points. And today we'll be looking at 4, maybe even 6 championship points. 8 if he can get to Volta Lux. If he can get 8 championship points, he will tie his points haul with the likes of Lenny Papanta, for example, a race winner in the iRacing Grand Prix World Tour. So he will be looking to try and just notch a couple more points on. And this is what we see. Drivers nearer the end of the season, we often get the sense that strength of fields as you go to the end of the season, Taylor, they normally peter out as drivers find themselves out of contention. They don't have the ability to go out there and race for the title. So they go, yeah, not my season, I'll come back next time and try and go for it. This championship, completely different.
I think the fact that we've only got 17 cars is masking that just a little bit, as only having so many limited spaces and honestly so many higher rated drivers just turning up in general. Cutting off that bottom almost third or so of the field has just elevated that strength of field right the way up. But at the end of the day, that is one of those things about sim racing. None of these drivers that you see out there in front of you are paid to be here. They are all doing it purely for the love of the game, and that's why it seems like they're going out there and leaving their hearts completely out there on track, because that's absolutely what they're doing. And of course they'll miss a couple of races here and there, but sim racing can't be the be all and end all of life. But even then, so many of these drivers make sure they turn up week after week after week. And as much as the Sim Speed Championship doesn't have any drop rounds, they do have the advantage of that in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour iRacing Championship. As we refocus on this fight between Alex Hagglund and Dennis Branch for 12th place. Hagglund not having such a good race so far today.
No, he got caught up on lap 1 as well as Dennis Branch. As Branch overcooks it into Torre VIP, and so Hagglund has the ability to get onto the power, but it's Hagglund on a set of mediums, Dennis Branch who has pitted on a fresh set of softs. So this will be a big move out there for 12th place, and Dennis Branch, you can see through every corner, has got a couple tenths in his back pocket. He is itching to get this move done, Taylor.
Yeah, don't forget, he's got that high downforce package as well, so that'll be helping him through those corners at slightly higher cornering speeds than Alex Hagglund. But it's going to be those straights where he really struggles to try and close in and make those overtakes work. We've seen turn 5 working for the high downforce package cars so far today, and that will be where Branch wants to make that move and wants to make it stick, because once he's in front of Alex Hagglund, he's got clean air to push through the twistiest section of this circuit and really try to stretch that second gap out, like we saw Joseph Loke do only 10 laps or so ago.
And so Alex Hagglund now has the ability to break away, give himself the margin, and then Dennis Branch has all of it to do. But be warned that James Byrne is there trying to figure out whether he's going to get through and jump up that next position. So that's going to be the next port of call, as Volta Lux, who has spent a day looking behind him, now has to do so again. Lawler and Staneros now sitting in position, looking to try and get things sorted. Volta Lux, an absolutely wonderful driver in this championship, Taylor, has done it all, has seen it all, has been there. 59th start, he's had 9 podiums to his name, he's got over 30 top 5s, he's got over 510 points out there in his series. He'll now move to just 2 points behind Jordan Gronkowski for 3rd all time as it goes. But here's the issue, the only thing missing from Volta, well, 2 things missing from Lux's resume right now: a pole position and a win.
Yep, and that's certainly not going to come today unless something happens to the 5 cars out in front of him. But even with all that experience, Lux has really been struggling on that tyre wear all race long, and I think that's part of the reason that Lawler and Staneros have closed in as quickly as they have. As Staneros almost into the back of Jeffrey Lawler into turn 13. But credit where it's due, the 2 cars in 7th and 8th have done a great job to just hold position and let their natural pace bring them both up to the back of Volta Lux, because now instead of scrapping for P7, both of them are in a fight for P6. So we'll see how this unfolds over the next 15 laps or so, but it's Lux who's in trouble as Lawler down the inside into turn 1 with the advantage of DRS, and Lux is going to have to give that one up and wait for an opportunity to slot on by, but we've seen him lose momentum being overtaken before, and it's Leopold Steneros who really needs to take advantage of that move into 1.
Yeah, the issue there was Volta Lux had to turn in and then had to back out of it again as Jeffrey Lawler was pretty much on his line as he wanted to take that cutback line as aggressive as possible, couldn't manage it, and so now he falls behind, and Steneros now can stare at the back of the black and red Mercedes in front of Volta Lux and try and find a way through on the Austrian. Lawler already out to 0.8 of a second here and trying to break that 1 second, which is so tantamount, and there it was for a moment, broken 1 second, 0.9 it is again as they work through to turn 13, but this is all about giving yourself as much opportunity as you can to defend the placement, and these drivers 45 seconds almost now off of the race lead, and Volta Lux here I think is looking a little bit tame in the late stages of this race. This has been a day where he's had good outright pace, but it's as this stint has developed, he's not been able to build it. He has DRS, which will allow him to fend off Leopold Steneros on this lap.
Only 45 seconds, I think, is some of these three are going to be very, very proud of, especially considering the pace of the front of the field. But it was a great exit from turn 14 that left Jeffrey Lawler easily defending into turn 1. Just Lux not getting close enough to re-attack. And I think it's within. No, off he goes deep down into turn 5 and into the gravel for Jeffrey Lawler. So those spots that he's fought so tenaciously over all day long, he will hand it back to Volta Lux and Leopold Steneros with such an unforced error. That is awfully timed.
Well, Jeffrey Lawler knows it's his first season. He's trying to understand it. It's the highest strength of field, he admitted just at the start of this race, that he has ever been in. So there is a weight of expectation of what you can get from it. And, oh, Brad, getting all out of shape. That will end that battle outright. And there comes the battle now of Lux and Steneros. And Brad's going to have to jump well out of the way. Even need to maybe take the long lap penalty there.
I'm just trying to check if there's any damage on that car, as it was very close to contact, but no contact for either of those two. But Newman lost so much time in that fight with Paul O'Regan over P15. I don't think he's going to have another chance to try and get the Englishman. As Steneros on Lux down into turn 1. We just caught the back end of that one, so hopefully we can grab a replay and see exactly how that one unfolded. But Steneros with the DRS just throws it up the inside of 1, gets that position stuck, and it is P6 for the Swede. He's now got the second sector to run away and try and build that second gap yet again.
I think Volta Lux found himself in no man's land as he was turning in for the corner. He was thinking, well, I'm just going to be all right here into turn 1. And by the time he turned in, he realised that there was a ghost on his inside that absolutely went through. We'll start with Jeffrey Lawler here, and the mistake that cost him that 6th place. You can see down on the gear, 7th gear, looking to get it down 6th, 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd. No, I left it way too late.
Yeah, just misses his braking point completely and ends up in that gravel on the outside of 5. And then it was absolutely no trouble for Lux and Steneros to thread their way through. Here's Brad Newman on Paul O'Regan for P15 as the Australian threw one at the inside of 13. Got it all sorts of out of shape as the brake migration not quite going where he wanted it to on that one and locking that rear axle. And he had to give up so much more time to let the leaders through just behind. And this is where we'll see that fight for P6 unfold as Steneros with DRS burning all that battery to close up and gain and gain and gain on Lux. Watch as the 5-length car gap becomes a 5-car length gap becomes absolutely nothing, and it's a big send into 1, snatching away that apex, and Lux had absolutely nowhere to go. A very decisive move from Steneros.
Yeah, and Leopold Steneros, who qualified the car 3rd here today, into 6th. Another 8 SimSpeed Championship points in his back pocket. He will take all day long and twice on Sunday, because he knows how critical the points are for him in terms of just building his margin and his confidence. And a little slide there for Lux is going to see Jeffrey Lawler go through. Samsung corner there. He just got himself a little early through, understeer through the middle of the corner up the hill for Lux, and that one's just carrying too much corner speed. Back through goes the American.
Yeah, I think it's another factor of that high tyre wear that Lux has been suffering from all race long. He is going to be suffering, I think, for the next 11 laps or so, just trying to get that Mercedes W13 to the end of this race. He's done a great job of fighting so hard all race long, but it's the tyres that have just given up on him before he really wants them to, and I think he may have to settle for a P8 finish unless the likes of Lawler or Steneros make a mistake in the closing laps of this.
Well, we'll see where those lie as we are now nearing 10 laps to go here at the Autodromo Internacional de Algarve, which is colloquially known as Portimao, on the, I would say, the fringes of the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. And having to get out of the way is Paul O'Regan in a very tough position. He'd love to break clear, but here's the issue he's got. The moment that Volta Lux goes by, Brad Newman is going to be right there on him like a rash, and he just cannot shake the teal machine behind.
There's certainly a way to do it, and if Paul O'Regan can make Volta Lux go for it and try and make Lux find more speed rather than O'Regan having to sacrifice it, that may be his golden ticket to staying away from Brad Newman. Unlike in real life, those blue flags that are, well, they're not quite waved at the side of the circuit, but they certainly are seen by the drivers, aren't an instruction. You don't have to get out of the way within 3 marshal posts or whatever the rule is in real life. It is just information. All the blue flag means in iRacing is there is a car a lap ahead of you coming up behind you. That's it. And O'Regan is actually being a lot more courteous than he has to be by the iRacing Sporting Code. And by staying in the middle of the road, he's actually sacrificed a lot of speed through turn 1, and it's let Brad Newman close in to within half a second. So showing that courtesy may have cost O'Regan that 15th position in this race, as that scrap between him and Newman is back on again.
And I'll tell you what, another scrap's back on again. Joseph Loke and Edward Apariari, those medium tyres have not played ball here for Joseph Loke, and so that 9th place, those 2 SimSpeed Championship points and the threat of a top 10 in the championship are suddenly starting to fade away. Edward Apariari here has himself the advantage, and he's going to want to try and hunt this back, but again, middle sector is only going to help the 13 over the 12.
It certainly is. Loke with that, again, with that higher downforce package, he will be able to pull ahead a little bit, but Paul O'Regan having a bit of an off in the first sector, I think down at turn 4 is where I saw it happen. It's going to kill any issues.
Samsung corner.
Yeah, it's going to kill any chances of a fight between Newman and O'Regan towards the end of this race at all. I think it was all unforced at the top of the hill as the car just gets light over the crest. The rear tyres lighten up, rear grip gone for Paul O'Regan. It's just game over, and he will be the last car to finish at this rate.
Well, here's the thing that you find with this car, and it's what catches many people who try and work it out. Most vehicles out there, you get all of the wheels spinning first, you go up into second, you might get a tiny bit, and then you're safe. In a car like this with 8 gears, as Dennis Branch and Alex Hagland now are going to go at it toe-to-toe, this is the sort of car, as Joseph Loke loses now the 9th position, it's the car that can have wheel spin in 3rd and 4th if you're not careful.
Yeah, it certainly can. That 170 horsepower electric motor that's bolted directly to that rear axle certainly isn't for show. That provides a lot of instant torque as Loke versus the Apariari down into turn 5. Apariari on that inside line will have the advantage, and there will be marbles on Joseph Loke's tyres, but he's going to be able to swing it around the outside of 7 and 8. He'll keep his nose in, but Apariari will shut the door beautifully as they get to the top of that hill, with Loke staying tucked under that rear wing. We'll have a peek to the inside of 9 and stay on that outside through 10, 11, switches back through into Portimao and takes that spot back in the middle sector, and Apariari is gonna have to wait again to get that 9th place back. But what a great bit of driving from Loke.
I think you can actually see when you're watching an iRacing when a driver out there has real-world experience compared to when they don't. I've seen it with Shane Van Gisbergen, I've seen it with Max Verstappen, I've seen it with Lando Norris, I see it here with Joseph Loeb. It's just an ornate style. I even saw it with Sebastian Weldon, the ability to go and make passes and set them up in a way that just makes the car in front look foolish. Apariari gets that move, but now watch the drive through 2. Now into 3, it will be the outside for Joseph Loeb. He'll pinch down on the apex and look for drive through 4. If he's got the drive through 4, he gets it. Apariari has to open up the steering. Thank you very much. And through goes Jacob Reed, who now laps 10th place.
Yeah, Apariari just not expecting that move into 4 at all. But with that downforce advantage, Joseph Loeb just able to keep his car's nose up the inside into turn 4 and then get the run through the corner, just throwing Apariari out of shape. And with that clean air, with that higher downforce aero package, should be able to pull away. But that was such an aggressive bit of decisive driving from Joseph Loeb yet again.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And speaking of gaps that are starting to coalesce here, Volta looks, I think, might have saved some tyre for late on, because Jeffrey Lawler here, it is fluctuating around 1.3 seconds. If that gets under 1, then Jeffrey Lawler is going to be in a world of trouble late on in this race. A last-minute battle is the last thing that the doctor wanted to order out there in this race. This has been a very, very tough race. It is one where they'll be looking around and be very fortunate at the end of this race that they can get this done within about 90 minutes.
Well, how many times in the last 30 weeks or so have we gone, these tyres have a memory? If you remember, Jeffrey Lawler had that spin on this set of tyres on his outlap. And if they are starting to go on him, this will be that rubber remembering that spin and giving up that little bit earlier than he might have otherwise expected. Lux, as we've seen all race so far, has been really hard on his tyres. So to see Lawler's softs fall back to the pace of Lux's is actually a little bit of a shock if you pretend that spin didn't happen. But we'll see how this unfolds over the next 5 laps or so, because this fight is not over yet as the gap just hovers around that 1.7 seconds.
Well, actually, I do want to give some credit here to Jeffrey Lawler, because compared to the race leader, Jacob Reed, he was only 0.3 slower on that last lap. So to say that, you know, he's struggling on the tyres, if 0.3 of a second, Taylor, is struggling, then let's say the entire field is.
I was going to say, Sperry, we've watched enough F1 in our time. We know that 0.3 of a second is an absolute age in motorsport.
It can be. 0.3 of a second on the track over the course of a lap is the equivalent of saying goodbye and then hearing 3 minutes later a phone call saying, oops, I forgot my keys.
It certainly is. But coming into the final laps of this race, we've still got Jacob Reed comfortably out in front with an 11-second gap over your, as they said at the Bahrain season finale a few weeks ago, your virtual champion, Eduardo Radice, who just needs to bring this car home. James Byrne in a fantastic spot to bring home another podium in this championship. And George Van Rensburg finding a bit of form at this track and looking to finish 4th. But he's only got 3 seconds behind him to Florian Kammeyer, and that fight could close up in the final couple of laps.
It certainly could. George Van Rensburg on course for his 5th fourth place finish of his career. He's got 5 5th place finishes and 2 podiums, so it would be his 12th top 5 finish in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour should he be able to find that mark. You look around, Florian Kammeyer, one of the few drivers who has completed the cycle, which means a driver who has finished P1 to P10 out there. Even Jacob Reed and Eduardo Radice haven't managed to do that. Jacob Reed needs a 6th and an 8th for the cycle, and Eduardo Radice needs a 5th and an 8th for the cycle out there overall. It's a case of Volta Lux needs just a win to complete the cycle, and that is what we love to see out there on racing. But Alex Hagland now still trying to fend off Dennis Branch, and Dennis is realising that there are trades and balances in a race like this one, Taylor, and I'm just looking around at that gap, and I am shocked that that gap has just skyrocketed up to 17 seconds. So I'm looking at Eduardo Radice. He's had a half spin at Torre VIP.
And he's not going to be kicking himself too much for that one, as he's kept himself in the race and kept the car alive. Hopefully we're going to get a replay to see exactly what happened in just a moment. This is live pictures as Radice comes up to that spot yet again, just a little bit wide at the apex, dipping a tyre into the marbles on the outside of the circuit, and that right rear corner just not providing the same amount of grip as it was on the previous lap. But kept it out of the barrier, didn't hit anything. Radice still looks set to bring home that championship, as Dennis Branch and Alex Hagland still scrapping over P12.
Dare I say it for the first time this season, that is nerves from Eduardo Radice, and I am sure that at this stage, when you know you're just a handful of laps away from the title, there's two ways you can go. You either relax and smile and driving becomes easy, or you know, you start feeling your legs shaking, you start feeling your hands shake, and you realise you're about to do it. The nerves, the anxiety starts to build, and then the mistakes creep in.
Can't say it's ever been for a championship, but I've definitely been in that spot before in an IndyCar race in an old league that used to run a few years ago around Detroit Belle Isle with a mistake, I think, from Joseph Loke, who's going to drop himself back down to P10 yet again. But final laps on a fresh set of soft tyres after a safety car restart, passing 3 cars to put the car on the podium for the first time this season. I can firmly say that's exactly how I was feeling, and it's not a nice feeling at all. And if it is nerves that Radice is feeling, all he needs to do is take that big, deep breath. Remember, there's only a few kilometers to go in this race. Certainly, if he does care about the SimSpeed Championship, there is nothing more he needs to do. He's got 6.5 seconds behind, 20 seconds out in front. Just bring the car home.
And that's what he wants to do. Just bring this car home. Have no worries, have no qualms out there. And positions still trying to sort themselves out in the very latest stages of this race. Joseph Loke wanting 9th over Edward Apariari, but have the tyres decided to give up the ghost. Jeffrey Lawler knows he's still got to hold his gap as he tries to go through, and lest we forget as well what's going on for 4th and 5th, because Florian Kammeyer late on here, Taylor, with 2 laps to go here around this Portimao circuit, is trying to hunt George van Rensburg.
He certainly is, and he's been chipping away at it 10th by 10th by 10th each and every lap. But this is Alex Hagland and Dennis Branch still fighting over that 12th place, as Hagland on that medium downforce setup, or that medium downforce trim, will have that straight line speed advantage, but Dennis Branch will have to fight for it in that middle sector. He has a job to do, and what he needs to do is get in front of Hagland into turn 5 and then run off through sector 2 and 3. He's had a couple of goes of it so far this race and hasn't managed to make it work, but if he wants to snatch that 12th place, he needs to make sure he's in front coming into this corner.
Yeah, then he'll only have 2 opportunities, or 1 now opportunity to make that corner work, because Jacob Reed will cross the line and Barney will wave the white flag for him. A margin of 19.5 seconds at the front of this field. He holds, as Hagland now still trying to hold on. No points available for this. This is a battle of pride. 2 drivers who just want to beat the other out there on this circuit and say, this is what I'm capable of. Florian Kammeyer's got his gap down now to 1.5 seconds. He's not close enough to George van Rensburg, but he'll know that final lap is inching ever closer here in this race at Portimao. And we talk about moments as, again, Dennis Branch will get the run out of Sagres, but he will not have the best run in the world with the difference in downforce packages along this main straight, heading towards Primera Corner. Turn number 1 out there on track. Alex Hagland will fend off that move, and surely will do so as well into turn 4. Margins mean everything in a race like this. It's been perfect for Jacob Reed, but it's not been perfect this season. The 2-time champion knew what it took to win a title. He's won it from going far back, as here comes the run now from Dennis Branch to go and get this done. Surely now at turn 5 he'll lunge down the inside, he'll get that move, and he'll now take 12th place away from Alex Hagland. Jacob Reed, he'll win the battle today, and he'll take the win, the fastest lap, the pole position here at Portimao. But just like Marco Sanfilippo before him 3 years ago, it will be an Italian who will take the iRacing Grand Prix World Tour crown because Eduardo Radiz, on his 17th podium of the season, will come to the line and he will be world champion.
And what a season it was for the Italian, being dominant for the last 20 odd rounds, and he has absolutely deserved it. But in the fight for P4, the gap down to half a second after a lockup in the middle sector for George van Rensburg. But it will go the South Africans' way here in Portimao with a couple more scraps left to decide. One of the fires has burnt out as Joseph Loke ended up a lap down on your race leader, and Alex Hagland finding himself in the same spot relative to Dennis Branch. But what a race that was. But more importantly, Eduardo Radiz, congratulations and take a bow for winning the 2025 Sim Speed Championship.
He wraps it up 2 races early, and that on a season of full merit. A season last year where he was a bridesmaid on so many occasions. He got himself so many chances to win races, to get podiums, and it took him 9 podiums of asking to get his first ever win in the Tour at Interlagos. He all but secured it at Interlagos then this year, and he knows how critical this race was to fight because he didn't get the qualifying he wanted in the strongest strength of field that the Grand Prix Tour has ever seen. A 6.2k soft, and he's gone from 12th on the grid up to 2nd. Eduardo Radiz has been a worthy champion by every single stage of the metric, and he will know that he will be the yardstick next season that everyone will try and measure by. So what a day at the office it has been, and let's get official classified results available for you on screen, because Jacob Reed did everything he needed to today. You couldn't have asked for anything better. He's just left himself too much work to do late on. A win by 21 seconds out there over Eduardo Radiz. 3rd will belong, and let's cut back because Eduardo Radiz is in donut mode now as he looks to try and celebrate and burn down a title here at Portimao, Taylor.
Yeah, he certainly does. He's coming to a stop already, so there's a small chance he either blew the motor or ran out of fuel. But what a way to cap off the championship. He's done such a great job this season.
James Byrne will be 3rd then, 25 seconds adrift, as George van Rensburg will take a very strong 4th place ahead of Florian Kammeyer and Leopold Steneros, another 8 championship points. Back-to-back races in 6th for him. Jeffrey Lawler will get 7th for the 2nd time in his career, as Volta Lux will go to 8th and be the last finisher on the leading lap. Edward Apariari will steal that away from Joseph Loke, whose extra point will edge him closer to the top 10 in the championship. Mark van Dalen will be just on the outside looking in, with Dennis Branch and Alex Hagland 12th and 13th caught up in a lap 1 incident. Kent Nielsen would be a lap down, as well as Brad Newman and Paul O'Regan, who are scrapping amongst each other. Only 1 retirement here today, and he just so happened to have 9,000 I rating at the start of this race, and now he won't have that as he leaves it. Emil Bernstorff, your retiree, on lap 1, getting caught with Leopold Steneros over the top of turn number 4. But a championship is decided, but not all the places are. 400 points, place 341, but it's still on for 3rd. And look how close it is for 6th, 7th, and 8th in the championship as well. All to play for, with Magny-Cours and Hockenheim still on the horizon, Taylor.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly one of the most exciting parts of what's left to come, because of course in real life they make their way over to the Middle East and find themselves in Qatar next time out. But for us, we don't have that circuit on iRacing, so we go to one of the classic Grand Prix circuits that's still out there, of the Circuit de Nevers-Magny-Cours, right slap bang in the middle of France. It is the scene of that famous 5-stop race from Michael Schumacher, and it's a track that is very difficult to overtake on, but the speed of the corners is going to be such a thrill, and seeing where these drivers can make those spots in the race and seeing how strategy unfolds is certainly going to be an interesting one, as it's not a track that comes up on iRacing very often at all, and I'm sure the pace around here is going to be absolutely mega in a modern Formula 1 car.
I love this circuit in terms of what it offers. That Adelaide hairpin is iconic with the grand curve that starts off the lap. And then, well, possibly one of the greatest corner names out there, Chateau d'Eau, which is up there, the water tower corner nearing the end of the lap. There are late chances to make passes, and it's one of the more technical ones on this one. You can catch that in 7 days' time with us from 7 p.m. at Greenwich Mean or UTC, whichever way you want to deal with it at this time of this. But a season is built on every single result, not just the ones you pick up time after time after time at the late stages of a season. We know what it takes to go out there and win once. Drivers look around, and there are drivers this season who have won just once. Florian Kammerer, just once. James Byrne, just once. You look at Joseph Loke, Emil Lundell, Johan Hart, just once they've been able to do it. Jacob Reed is a champion, a two-time champion. He's managed to find 6 of them, and now his 7th here today at the Autodromo Internacional do Algarve. But the key is a full season. How many times do you get the win? And when it's not your way, seconds and thirds. How many times can you go and build a season like that? And simply put, you had to be better than good. You had to be better than great to stop this driver winning it with 2 rounds of the championship to go. Absolutely sensational and well-deserved. The world title goes back to Italy here in the iRacing Grand Prix World Tour. Eduardo Radice, hats off. A simply magnificent season. And now he brings himself into the pantheon of him, Jacob Reed, and Marco Sanfilippo.
Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.